Put your hands together for Nate Helbach.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hopefully this is working. She mic'd me up. So glad to be back in New Zealand. As Camilla said, I have very fond memories of South Island, and now I actually love the North Island. Maybe a little bit more than South Island, but South Island treated me pretty well. So I won't get into the debate over South or North Island, but I'm Nate, founder and CEO of Neutral, and what we are is a sustainable regenerative development firm based in San Francisco and Madison, Wisconsin. And for those who maybe are less familiar with the states, I've put up a map for you so that you can see where we are. But we have projects throughout the Bay Area of Northern California. We have a few projects in Arkansas, which is that little greenhouse in the middle south down there. And then we have a big headquarters up in Chicago area. And we have a few projects that we're going to talk about today in both Milwaukee and Madison and then also Chicago. But really just going into a little bit about our firm and what we stand for and how we define sustainability. I think we've really talked a lot here today, and there's really a big conversation going on about sustainability and what it means. And what we really try to do is define what sustainability means. And we wrote a long piece about this, and I won't get into a lot of detail. But we believe that sustainability means achieving equilibrium where we consume natural resources at the same rate they renew, a state we call neutral. And what we see is with wood, it's a beautiful structure because wood, it automatically grows in the forest, it's natural. And if you can take those trees that sequester carbon during their life and you can put it into a beautiful building, then you have this really nice carbon sink and it's fully regenerative. And so we're looking for other materials like wood that we can use that have this kind of natural ecosystem in them where they start to grow in the forest or just in the world, and we can use them in the buildings, and they automatically renew, and we're not depleting all these natural resources. And I love what we saw here earlier today with some of the AI stuff and all the fossil fuels we're using to power AI. And it would be great if we could figure out a way to have energy be the same way, where we can use energy and consume energy at the same rate it's starting to be produced in the natural ecosystem. So that's how we define sustainability. Getting a little bit into how we're structured, we're fully vertically integrated. So we have 6 companies. We're about to acquire another one. We have 31 employees. Half of those are in San Francisco. The other half are in Madison. And the reason why we're fully vertically integrated is because for us to achieve this radical difference of what we want to do in development, we don't feel like we can be within this old paradigm of having architects be siloed, engineers be siloed, the GCs over here. I was talking with someone today about not having maintenance guys and property managers in meetings because they didn't want to show up. And so what we want to do is have everything be under one umbrella and really change the paradigm of what development is. And we feel like the only way we can do that is by vertical integration and have our architects, our engineers, our property managers, or even carpenters all sitting at the same table, figuring out these very complex problems all at the same time. The other thing is that I want to point out, which is my little baby, is called Neutral Workshop, and it's our carpentry facility. And we have a bunch of specialty carpenters in Madison and Milwaukee, 15 of them. And what they do is they do really nice custom craft carpentry for all the finished details. So we're building our structures out of wood, but then we're also doing a bunch of really nice handcrafted carpentry for all the finishes because we really feel like things have gone way too mass. They've gone too big. And we've really gone to a really not very human scale of development. And so we want to bring this human scale back, and where you touch a knob and you can see that it's handcrafted, and you look at a slat wall and you can see that that was built by someone local, instead of having this big kind of monstrous development process. So I asked AI if it could create a little hyperbolic image for me called Flat Earthers. And it's supposed to be somewhat comedic because we've ran into a lot of flat earthers along the way of people who are denying the science, people who are denying the testing that we're doing. And what I mean by that is when we started this whole process and when I founded the company in 2019, there was no clear path for how we get approved with mass timber in the United States. There was no code. There was really nothing. We would have to go through all these alternative means and methods requests, is what they're called, variances. And we decided, you know what, we'll take the challenge. We're a startup, and we're going to do it. But what we ran into along the way are these people who said, no, that won't work. No, the building's going to burn down. No, this isn't safe. And we tried to prove them wrong. And so one of the things that the first guy we ran into was this fire marshal at the city of Madison. And he had this big concern about, even though there had been a bunch of testing, about flashover. And if you don't know what flashover is when a fire goes from a really small fire to when the whole building literally, or the whole room literally combusts. And it creates this flash. And it goes from a small fire into a big fire, which could burn the whole building down, which of course would be bad. And so he said, if you can't prove to me that flashover is not unsafe in mass timber buildings, I will never approve your building. And we were proposing a 14-story building. And I was like, oh, this might be the crux. This might be when our company is dead. And so I said, okay, well, what do we have to do to prove it to you? And he said, you have to pay for all this testing, and you have to prove that we won't have a risk of flashover. And so, okay, I said, let's go through and do the testing. And we found a USDA Forest Products Lab is located in Madison, Wisconsin, which is very fortunate. And they fortunately donated their testing facility to us for free. So we just had to pay for the materials, because otherwise it would have been probably a $200,000 to $300,000 test. So fortunately, we went through the test, and we had just gotten to the end of it after 4 months, and I get an email from this fire marshal. And he says, no matter what the test shows, I'm never going to approve this building. And I'm like, what? Dude, come on. And so I'm like, how is this fair? Of course this isn't fair. And so I went back to him and I said, well, will you approve anything? And he said, no. Whatever I will approve will only be prescriptive in the code. And so this was now 2021, and the 2021 IBC was published, and he was not super aware of the new code. And in 2021 IBC, there's a provision for mass timber now up to 14 stories, which we were 14 stories. And so I pulled out my book and I said, well, we have a provision now. And he's like, well, we'll just wait. We're in 2015 IBC in Wisconsin, so you can't get approved. And fortunately, we had one of our lawyers get into the code, and the code says you can use a future code automatically. So we went back to him and we said, hey, we can use a future code automatically, so you can't not approve us. And so fortunately, we're going to talk about the building that we're just finishing at the end of this month, and that's that building that we're able to finish. The guy's not happy. He's very upset. We're going through all of our occupancy testing right now, and I think we'll fail a few, but that's okay. But the reason why this works, the reason why there's science behind it, is actually a very cool natural phenomenon that I have up here on the screen. So in San Francisco, just north of us, we have beautiful redwoods, and those redwoods grow super tall. And what happens when we have fires, which my parents lived there, and we had a big fire about 3 years ago, you have this beautiful natural char effect. And so when you have a fire in the forest, it heats up really, really hot. But you still see these beautiful redwood trees standing after the fire is done. And so why are they not falling? Why don't they fall over? They don't fall over because wood naturally chars at a certain rate per hour. And so when we go through our testing for a tall building that we're going to be showing you a little bit later for 31 stories, we look at what the char is on an hourly rate. And so we design our buildings so that they can withhold the structure, and the columns and beams can withhold the load. But then we add on additional fiber actually to those beams and columns. And that additional fiber that we add on is called the char fiber. And the reason why it's called char fiber is because it's not taking any structural load. It's only there as a sacrificial layer for when we have a fire. And so the test we did here, which we just got done doing in Austin, and yes, this test cost $500,000, and so we were able to afford that one. But we were able to find out that for every hour, we burn about 3.25 centimeters. I converted that from inches. It took me a long time. I asked ChatGPT, and it was like 3.25. So 3.25 centimeters per hour. We need 3 hours for our primary elements of the building. So we have to add that amount of fiber to be able to accommodate the 3-hour fire rating. And that's what we call char. And so that's why, if you're asking about CLT, or maybe it's a bad word, I found out yesterday, mass timber, it's a safe material. It's actually even more safe than steel and concrete because you're able to accurately predict the amount of burn no matter how hot the fire gets. Unlike steel and concrete, where at a certain inflection point, you're going to hit an inflection where the steel actually starts to bend under the weight of the heat. And so we believe that mass timber is one of the safest materials to use, and that is why we're advocating for it across the country and across the world. So Baker's Place, this is our first case study into our mass timber foray. This is a 14-story, 206-unit building right downtown Madison, Wisconsin. We're just wrapping up at the end of this month. And we learned a lot of lessons on this project. And it's been one of those projects that I'll probably look back in 10, 15 years and say we were stupid. We were idiots, you know? And it's like there's so many things that we did wrong, but we would never be able to get to where we are today without figuring out all the challenges that we had. And just a few challenges to walk through here is we found a local architect, because we weren't vertically integrated at the time, that didn't have a lot of mass timber experience. And so because of that, they were not really understanding the nuances of all the different things compared to steel, concrete, or stick frame that you have to think about and design for. So if you're thinking about building a mass timber building, try to find someone that has a lot of experience. The other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the presentation is how we financed our buildings. Because a lot of lenders, even a lot of equity partners, did not like the idea of having mass timber because it's risk. It's new, it's unknown, and that adds layers of risk above the layers of risk of already building a development in downtown Wisconsin. We also looked at a few different systems because we wanted to understand the cost-benefit analysis of mass timber versus steel and concrete. And so USDA gave us a wonderful grant, and they allowed us to actually model 3 or 4 different buildings up to a level 400 design in BIM, and be able to price each one, schedule each one, understand the carbon impact of each one, and look at what is the cost-benefit analysis of a full mass timber system, a hybrid system, a steel, and then a concrete system. And you can go on our website and find that. I won't get into all the details, but if you just go to neutral.us, it's right there. We decided to go with steel and concrete, partly because of that story I was telling you, because part of it was we weren't able to expose as much as we wanted to. He only allowed us to expose 20%, this fire marshal. And so we said, okay, for those non-elements that we're not going to expose, let's switch to steel so we can save some money and actually make it work. Because when we were going out to bid this project, we had gone through all of design development, and we went out to bid with our contractors, which we have great contractors, and they came back and they said, Nate, it's $40 million over budget. And it was an $80 million budget. And I was like, oh, no, this is terrible. I thought it was the end of our company. I was like, this is existential. We were almost out of money. And I was like, we need to get this project in the ground. Otherwise, we're not going to have a company any longer. And so we went back to the drawing board. We did some of these analysis. We were able to actually VE, which VE, I don't like that word because it's pretty bad. But we were able to VE about $30 million out of the scope, and part of it was switching the structural system to this hybrid structure. On the next project, we decided to not do the hybrid structure for a few different reasons, which I'll get into. But this is the project back last fall where we're just topping out the structure, and you can kind of see the structural elements that are steel and then the ones that are not. So Neutral Edison. Neutral Edison is a building that we just started. Actually, last week we broke ground. And it is a 31-story mass timber, almost fully mass timber building that will be the tallest mass timber building in the world once complete in May of 2027. We also are pushing the boundaries on sustainability. We have Passive House certification, and we're also the tallest and biggest living building certified building in the world, which if you're not familiar with LBC, I would definitely look into that certification. I think it's one of the most holistic certifications because it's not only looking at carbon, it's not only looking at energy, it's looking really at a holistic user experience. And what we're trying to do is curate a better user experience for the tenant so that they can actually improve their lifestyle by living in one of our buildings. So it's 31 stories, 378 units, and we're going to be opening up May of 2027. For this building, we decided to use a full mass timber structure. So we have to build the base out of concrete because that's the parkade. And right now, it's not super great to build parquets out of mass timber. But then once we hit our transfer, it's almost all mass timber except for our core. And we're able to partner up with Stora Enso out of Europe and be able to get all of our timber from them. And one thing that we have as a really cool system here is it's a hybrid kind of quasi-geothermal system. So we're right next to the Milwaukee River, and we're driving piles. And as part of our pile design, we're like, well, could we do geothermal? And one of our engineers came up with this really unique system that we're able to actually tap into the river water and use that for cooling of the building. And then We Energies, which is our energy company, has this very old energy that produces steam. And that steam they run through the downtown. And we're able to actually use that steam to heat the whole building. And so the full HVAC system is almost carbon neutral because we're able to use a byproduct of an energy company, and we're able to use the river, which is flowing 24/7, to heat and cool the building. The other really unique thing about this building is because it's Passive House certified, we're at about a 70% reduction of operational carbon emissions. And since we're using mass timber and recycled aluminum for our facade, we're at about a 60% reduction of embodied carbon, which is all the carbon that comes from the construction processes. So we're not yet to our state that we want to be of neutral, but we're getting much, much closer as we iterate to that state. The other thing we're looking at, which we'll talk about at the end of the slide deck, but it's really how do we affect people's lives? Because we're building buildings that people live in, and we're not just giving them a key for 12 months and saying, hey, go live in this black box, and you can give us that key back and pay us $24,000 in the interim. No, we're really wanting to figure out how people improve their lives by living in our buildings. And so we're looking at air quality, we're looking at water quality, we're looking at daylighting, but we're also looking at the actual person themselves. And how can we see their life get better from living in our buildings? And so we have a holistic wellness program that we have a huge 15,000 square foot fitness facility, nutrition facility, clinic. And we have a doctor on staff that they can go to at any time and get a full diagnostic with VO2 max training, resting metabolic rate training, a whole blood panel, mobility analysis, and really look at a holistic experience of not just living in a multifamily building and being able to rent a box, but being able to change your life and go into an experience that improves your health and well-being. A few of the lessons learned from Edison. The one big one, I think, is we really bit probably more than we could chew. It's a $210 million deal that took us about 3.5 years to finance because of how big it was. And so I think we'll do it again because we're stupid and that's what we like to do. But it was something that I think we kind of need to grow and iterate on. And so one thing that we're deciding to start to iterate on is our processes and being able to get more digital. And I know this is all about digitization. And so we just are finishing up our low-rise building. And this is our low-rise product line called 517 West Main. And the focus here is how can we look at urban cores and do urban infill development, which we title Missing Middle Housing. And it's really finding small sites that we can build somewhere between 4 and 50 units in a very quick fashion, in a componentized fashion. And so this is the first one that we're doing. It's 33 units. It's only 4 stories. And the cool thing about this site is that we acquired the site in November of 2023. We had full entitlements by July of 2024. We had full financing by November of 2024. We started construction in December of last year, and we'll finish up in August of this coming year. And so the quick iteration on this building is allowing us to learn lessons that much quicker than something like we were just talking about with Edison, where it takes 3-4 years to just get in the ground. and then it's going to take us another 2 years to finish construction, and then it'll take us another year to figure out the kind of maintenance and operational capacities that we need to learn. Whereas this building, in less than 24 months, we're actually going to be able to understand how we build the building, how we put it together, and how we operate it. And so this is what we're focused on for the next probably about 3 to 4 years, to be able to understand really the holistic development process, and then we'll go back to continuing to build large buildings. But a few points on the system that we designed is a 12 by 12 grid. And maybe you're asking, why are we designing a 12 by 12 grid? The reason why is we partner up with Stora Enso, with Binderholz, with KLH. All these are CLT manufacturers in Europe. And they all have something that's called a blank. What is a blank? A blank is just something that they mass produce, and I know that's a bad word, but I'll say it again, mass produce along in their manufacturing facilities. So they don't have a custom project. All these mass timber manufacturers are producing blanks of CLT and glulam, because in Europe, the carpenters typically buy those, and they'll use those for home building, for small projects, and they won't do any customization. And what this does is it creates a very efficient manufacturing process that's much cheaper than having to design a custom building and having them route out all these little kind of nuances into the CLT panels. So the reason we chose this 12 by 12 grid is because we're using those blanks and we're trying to have it be the most efficient manufacturing process. The other thing that we're doing is we're prefabricating all of our walls, which are cold form steel framing, up in Fond du Lac, which is about an hour north of Madison. And those walls are all on 12 by 12 grid as well. And those walls come to site, and we're able to erect those walls very quickly and then put the CLT deck right on top. And it's all load bearing. And for this first project, we designed everything to LOD 600. And the goal is to iterate to a state where we actually have all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection runs in those walls. But we didn't do it for this project because we wanted to quickly go through the project and understand how to build it, how to put it together. But the next project, the idea is to really bring all these components together and allow for those other things to be included. This is the componentization. So if you look here, we kind of expanded it and then contracted it for you. But we have CLT decks, cold form framing walls, bathroom pods, and then we even have a custom kitchen assembly from Bath Systems down in Austin, Texas. And the idea is that this all goes together really quickly, and it's able to be iterated on and utilized on a lot of different sites because it's all based around 12 by 12. So we can drop this 12 by 12 system on any site, and we can be able to figure out very quickly what the cost is, how long it's going to take, and what the process is for erection. And so this is vanilla. This is just our CLT decks and cold form framing walls that you can see here. And we're going up very quickly. We unfortunately got a little bit slowed down because we had a fire on the ship. And so the CLT about 2 months ago left Bremerhaven, Germany. And between Germany and Scotland, I get a call one morning, and it's from a German guy. And he's like, "Nate, I got really bad news for you." And I'm like on a run at 5 a.m. And he's like, "We unfortunately had a fire on the ship." And I'm like, "What? A fire on the ship? That sounds terrible. What happened?" And he's like, "Well, it's not your timber, but it is going to cost you some time." And so the ship ported in Aberdeen, Scotland. And when it ported, they had to do all these like crazy insurance things and claims. And it cost us 3 weeks. And so 3 weeks later, that shipment left. In the interim, they shipped the other shipment because our floors were separated. So 1 and 2 were on one floor, 3 and 4 were on another floor. And I said, "Guys, our engineers, could we use floor 3 for floor 1? Sounds like a crazy idea, but could we use floor 3 for floor 1? And they're like, I don't know. I don't know if that would work, Nate. But let's take a look. And so we modeled it up in BIM, and we were able to switch out floor 3 with floor 1 because of how systemized our approach is and because of how rigid we'd been with making sure every single stack is aligned and making sure we don't have any deviation throughout the whole grid. And so it was something that was a very painful experience, but we were able to learn a wonderful lesson, which is we can quickly iterate on these processes. And so one thing, oh shoot, my slide deck is moving for some reason. One thing that we learned from that is we have to quickly think through scenario planning, which what we mean by scenario planning is being able to look at some of these things that will happen when you get a call at 5 a.m. in the morning about having your ship burned down, and being able to think through how do we use third floor for first floor, and how do we switch different things out. But I just want to show you one video, which hopefully I can get to. But this is now our erection. So this was 2 weeks ago that we were able to, hopefully that plays. There we go. That we were able to get our CLT decks on site. So we had our cold form framing. It was just sitting there waiting for the CLT, and we were able to get it on site and put it up within only 3 days. Then we were able to bring in our next cold form framing, put that up in 4 days, and now this week we're just starting our second floor. And so we'll be topping out April 17th, which is only, we thought it was going to be a 22-day delay. Now it's only going to be an 11-day delay. So it's really thinking about how we can create componentization so that we can quickly iterate and have very, very quick building. I'll end on this one. So this is what we're working on right now. These are our digital tools. So my partner, Matt, he owned a big tech company and sold it to Carlyle for $1.2 billion. And he decided that we need to be more tech-enabled. We need to be a tech-enabled developer and have all of our processes be a little bit more iterative. And so what we're starting with is our site analysis, but we're trying to do it through the whole development process. So I'll quickly walk you through here what we're doing. So the first is our spatial analytic research tool. So that 12 by 12 grid that I was talking about, we can drop that in any GIS map. QGIS is a big mapping system in the States that we use. And we can drop it in there, and we can quickly figure out what the geometry is for the site, and quickly then figure out, using our bill of materials, what we're going to actually need to build this type of building on this site. Whether it be 2 units, 4 units, 8 units, 12 units, whatever it is, we can figure it out. And so this tool, we're in beta still. We're just using it on this first project. And we're hoping that eventually that we'll be able to, within seconds, quickly computate what the return on investment will be for a specific site to figure out, does that site work for us to buy, or should we move on to the next site? After that, we go into design. So once we figure out, okay, this site works, let's go through the rigorous design process. Then we're starting to create these systems where we have a bill of materials, so a material library with all those components that you saw before. They all break down into different elements. All those elements have costs. Those costs go into our bill of materials. Those bill of materials then are used to build our financial model, and it's also used to put our sequencing together for our project schedules so that we can accurately understand what the financial implications are of building this building on this site and continue to check whether it has a good return on investment or not. And so that's the second part of our tool. The third part then is really understanding the financial model so that we can launch this to the market. And one big thing that we found is we initially went out and tried to find a big check, a big pension check, $100 million, $200 million to fund all these projects. And it was not there. It was right in the midst of COVID. Everyone was shutting doors in our face, and it wasn't working. And so what we decided to do is we said, let's democratize the process. Let's go out and find 50, 100, 200 investors to invest in our deals and put $100,000, $200,000, $400,000, $500,000 in. And so what we built was an investor software that allows us to, and you can go on our website and see this, go out to any investor who's accredited, and they can log into our website, see all the deals that we currently have listed, do their due diligence, and actually go through the investment process right there online. And now we have about 300 investors in the portal. We have over $300 million that has come in through this process, and it's been a great decision for the company, and it's allowed us to really expand instead of being kind of tied down to a pension fund check. The next part of this process is a streamlined delivery model. And what I talked to about earlier in that story I told was really a testament to how we're doing this. But essentially, we have two parts of the building. One is componentized, one is site-specific. The reason we've broken it out like that is because back when we were planning the system, we were looking at QGIS, and you look at QGIS and you see all these different kind of shapes and sizes, and maybe there's this grade of a certain site and another grade of another site. And to think about how you can create a system and computate that specific site on all sites is very, very difficult. And so what we decided to do is we did site-specific construction, which is the lower portion of the building, the parkade. And then where you see that green datum line, that's where we hit our transfer. That's where we go to our 12 by 12, a very componentized system. And the reason we've done that is to be able to stay very efficient and have all of our components be based on the same transfer slab instead of have to kind of modulate to different sites. The last thing, and I know I'm on time, so I have a minute, is we've really focused on health and well-being. And what we're doing is we have a great clinical space that each tenant, when they sign their lease, they're able to come into. And we take them through a rigorous diagnostic. So we do VO2 max testing, we do an RMR, we do a blood panel test, we do a DEXA scan, and then we give them kind of a diagnostic of this is what you should be doing when you're living in this building. This is our personal trainer that you should be seeing. This is our nutritionist that you should be seeing. And then we have a really great just access to this amenity pool for all of our large developments that these tenants can use. And it's really focused on how do we get people back to understanding how we use natural materials and understanding that living in a building does affect their life. And by choosing the building that they live in could affect their life in a positive way or a negative way. And we hope that at neutral, their lives will be affected in a positive way. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate flying over to New Zealand. It's been a great time.
Awesome. Look.